What have you heard about chronic fatigue syndrome previous to me getting it? What can you say about it?
Previous to you getting it, all I heard mostly was back in the 1980s when I was doing depositions, and it would come up in a doctor's deposition,
Mm-hmm.
and majority of the doctors didn't believe in it.
You're a court reporter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was kind of looked upon as it's all in your head type of disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the basis of my knowledge of it. And so all these years, that's kind of been in the background, in my head.
You said it was in the 1980s. Did you hear about anything specific happening? I know with chronic fatigue syndrome, there's a major outbreak in the 1980s. Did you hear anything about that, or did you just hear it was something going, like some sort of hysteria?
Didn't really hear anything about hysteria, no. It was only in the context of my work that when that or fibromyalgia, when
Mm-hmm.
those words came up, it was something where most of the doctors didn't believe in it.
Right, and so the chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia seem to be the same in that context.
In my head it was,
yeah.
But I didn't really know.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people that still they have the same view. And what did you think about chronic fatigue syndrome when I said I had it the first time I told you? Did you have any different perception? Were you in shock? Did you think back to your depositions in the 1980s?
I did.
I mean, about the 1980s.
Yeah, I did think back to that, and to be honest, I thought, oh no, now my daughter thinks she has something. And I hope that this isn't something where she's going to be sick and not know what's wrong with her, and it's going to be in her head. I thought maybe it was in your head. I didn't really know, but my first reaction was kind of like dread, you know, at first. Because it's like, I just wasn't sure whether to really believe it.
Yeah.
You know.
Because that's what you have known from your depositions.
And I really never looked into it.
Yeah, and people never talked about it. It wasn't something just going around that people would talk about.
No.
Yeah. And what was I like before I ever told you I had chronic fatigue syndrome? For example, like what was my work situation, school? What was I like before?
Well, you didn't live with me, but I knew that you were really busy working and going to school and getting good grades, and just had a lot of energy and was very determined, high drive person.
Yeah.
Likes to play hard and work hard.
Yeah, play hard, work hard.
Yes. Yeah.
Party hard. And then, how was I different the first time that you saw me after I was diagnosed? So I had told you, I believe, over the phone that I was diagnosed as I was going to different doctors up in my area a few hours away. And then at some point, you started to visit me, or I started to come down here, and so you saw how I changed, or what kind of change did you see?
Again, I didn't really realize how sick you were because I didn't really have an idea of what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't probably believe you 100%. I didn't know. I mean, you could have just been really tired because you do so much with school and working a lot. And so, I mean, I had just to go. I didn't go to any of your doctor's appointments or anything.
Yeah.
So
we're talking about at that point.
Yeah, at that point, and I didn't see a lot of you, so I wasn't really sure until
later. Yeah, which we'll get to later, the fun times. So I'm actually going to go into that right now. So that kind of happened, and in that time, I actually, that's just when I got diagnosed, and for me, it did, things did change quite rapidly. So I was out of state for a while trying to get better. That was the purpose of it anyway. So I was so sick that I had to come back home. So this is like flash forward almost, 8 months later or so. What was it like seeing me every day in my condition? So after I was out of state, I came back home. I came here. What was I like?
Well, can I kind of go back to when you were out of state?
Yeah.
And by that point, I believed you. I knew that you were doing everything you could to figure out what to do, what was best. And you're really bright, and you have a good head on your shoulders. So I was just hoping for the best, and putting that kind of in your hands and everything. And I felt really bad that you were so sick. So then it wasn't until then reality really also hit home. Well, to go back also, when some of your first tests, they thought maybe you had cancer. That really depressed me. And you didn't see me,
and that was
but when you first told me that, you weren't living at home.
Yeah.
So you don't know that it did depress me, and it did really affect me.
Yeah. So back to the question, what was it like when I came back most recently, when I just kind of came back here?
Right.
This stretch of me being here right now,
right.
before I started feeling better.
Well, so then it hit me even more when me and your dad came and got you when you were living on the ranch.
Yeah.
And we went up there to bring you back home with me and stuff. And at that point, I was like, I'm all in. Like, whatever I can do to help you, because you're my little girl,
But then at that point, it definitely kicked in that this is an illness, or even whether psychological or not, I was sick.
Well, it kicked in before then, but that was a point where it was like, whatever it takes, for the rest of my life to help you, because at that point you were helpless.
Yeah.
Really.
And how was I helpless? Can you give an example?
You couldn't, if you needed water, you couldn't go to the store to get water. You were kind of isolated. You weren't living with anybody, and you didn't have the energy to do anything, and you were in a lot of pain, and so.
Yeah, so that was, I think that was one of the times you first saw me for a few days in a row,
right.
And seeing that.
Right.
And so that was, so I went out of state a few times, so I'm sorry if the question's a little confusing, because I went out of state about 3 times trying to rehabilitate somewhere else. So at that point, so I came here, and then I went to Kansas, and then I was too sick out there, and it wasn't working for me, and then I came back here.
Yeah.
And so what was I like here in your house before I started treatment? I believe I was here for maybe like two months before I did LDN.
Right.
And so what was
seemed
that?
Like longer. Well, you were here, and then you went to Kansas, and then you came back.
Yeah, so I'm talking this most recent time.
Yeah. So you were pretty much bedridden. It kind of reminded me of when I had mono, only it was a lot worse.
Yeah. And longer.
A lot longer, and it wasn't just you couldn't get out of bed. It was like the pain, it was the brain fog, it was everything.
Yeah. And I've never, I know what I feel like in a crash, but I obviously can't see it for when it's in the mirror. So can you kind of give a description of, I know I was sick every day, and that was kind of constant, but then when I would have these episodes, what the episodes were kind of like, or did you find that to be just more constant?
Actually, when you were crashing, you were usually by yourself a lot. Mm-hmm. So, if you needed something, I'd go in there and bring you water, something like that, and then leave you alone, because, I couldn't really talk to you or anything. Yeah. So, your question.
And when you say you couldn't talk to me, is it because it was too loud? And when you say you couldn't talk to me, what was that?
When someone is that sick, you're not in the mood to talk, So,
as far as seeing what it was going like physically. Like, did I have a fever? Was I shaking? Like, can you just tell some things that you saw?
Well, you got really thin, really, really thin because, and and I saw that you were eating, but your body wasn't absorbing the nutrients.
Yeah.
And as far as being hot, the shakes, this and that, you did, but again, a lot of times I sort of left you alone.
Yeah.
I didn't sit there and go, Jamie, what exactly are you feeling?
Yeah.
I just kind of left you alone so that you can, when you're feeling that sick, you don't usually want someone asking you a bunch of questions.
Right.
So I got that, and I would just try to bring you water, whatever you needed.
Yeah. And you said that it was mono-like, so, I don't even know much about mono. I don't think I've ever had mono, so for people that don't know what mono is like, when you said I was in my bed very mono-like, is that just being kind of flu-like, just extremely tired?
Well, when I had mono, I could hardly get out of bed for like 2 months.
Yeah.
So that's what I equated to.
Yeah.
Like, I barely could get up to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. And so it was the same with me, but they just, as far as a diagnosis, they just say, we don't know how, it's mono-like, and we don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah, so that's got to be really scary.
Yeah, it definitely was scary.
And plus, I didn't know if there was other things going on, too.
Yeah.
With breathing.
Yeah.
Breathing problems that you've had and stuff.
Yeah, neither did I.
Yeah.
And then, what kind of, when you went to meet my doctors, some CFS specialists, and then just doctors in general that do believe in this disorder, how did that change your perception of chronic fatigue syndrome and how you thought that I was handling this disorder?
My mind was changed before I went with you to see your doctors, because of you have done so much research, and that I realized that there was so much established,
like, science behind it.
Yes. Yeah. So that kind of came before I went with you to see your doctors. First, I went to see your regular doctor in Santa Barbara, and that was really interesting because, like you've said before, he didn't know that much about it, and you were actually educating him. And you have educated yourself so much, you can tell you're not bullshitting.
Yeah.
You can tell your stuff.
Well, I mean, there would be times, when I first got sick where I'd be like, am I crazy? Like thinking like, am I crazy? And there would be a few days like that. And then, I'd look up like, hypochondria and thinking I'm crazy. And then, in the morning when I wake up screaming and not being able to move and actually what you're thinking is this really just depression, but the difference between depression and this illness is depression. Sometimes you don't care and you don't want to get better, and with this I was like, what can I do to get better?
And I'm really glad you did that.
Yeah, me too.
Because I know that there were times where you wanted to give up too.
Yeah.
So that was scary.
Can you talk about because I remember, I think that was the last time I came back here, after I tried so much, I'd been suffering for at least a year, and then saying, this is too hard, I want to give up. Like, how does that make you feel as a parent about just this disease?
Well, it's scary. I knew that you were talking to a therapist, and I was just hoping she was a good therapist, and you seemed to enjoy her, so I kind of kept my nose out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things, you always want your kids to be happy and healthy.
Yeah.
So it's hard when they're not, and as a parent, you can't really fix it because there's not a lot you can say that,
make it better.
A child is going to want to hear, especially because I don't understand exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes when I do try to help,
as parents do.
Yeah, it's like, Mom, you're embarrassing me, or shut up, or something like that, because I put my foot in my mouth sometimes.
Well, it's just like 2% of the time.
So, but the question was like me believing you and stuff.
The question was how. Well, first it was how did you feel when I kind of said like I want to give up? as you know, as a parent?
I tried to get that out of my mind. I didn't
So
really
I
want
assume
to
that's very depressing.
Yeah, well, I don't want to think. You know, you've been through a lot in your life with everything, and so I just try to concentrate on other things and hope to God that you have the will. And I was just so happy that one, you decided what you want to do with your life in the future. You know, and by getting so involved with this disease, it gave you a reason to live. It gave you a reason to get out there and help people and stuff. So,
one of the good things, if we
yeah,
could,
because
had to take some good things out of it. Okay, so